Chapter 1, The Sciences of Anatomy and Physiology, Part 1. So, early on, human anatomy was basically a collection of information gathered in various random ways. Some information about human anatomy was learned by treating people's wounds and injuries, from falls, from sword cuts, from whatever. The other way that human anatomy was learned about was from the study of animals and the butchering of animals. Of course, this isn't exactly correct, but the animals did provide some information relatable to human beings. And then finally, in the Middle Ages, Renaissance period, people would started cutting up human corpses. They would rob graves of freshly interred bodies and use that for dissection purposes, which is where anatomy gets its name. Ana for up, tomy for the process of cutting. So human anatomy, the process of cutting up humans. The official definition for anatomy is the study of the form and structure of the body. And physiology is examining how the body functions, so that we have two interlocked concepts, the study of the function and the study of the structure itself. Anatomy can be viewed at very different levels. There's cytology, which is the study of cells, so human cells. Histology, the study of tissues, those cells as they work together with other cells to perform functions. Can also do it via gross anatomy, the whole body. The systemic anatomy is studying the body based on different systems of the body, so cardiovascular system, skeletal system, and so on. Regional anatomy would be the study of a portion of the body, so say the right arm could be studied via regional anatomy. Comparative anatomy is comparing the human anatomy to that of other animals. Embryology is the study of the anatomy of the developing embryo and fetus. And then there's some other newer categories of anatomy, such as pathological anatomy, that is studying the changes caused to the body by disease. This could be gross or microscopic, both. And that's, of course, important in order to be able to identify and diagnose someone's disease. And then very recent is radiographic anatomy, which is our ability to look at internal structures by using things like X-rays and MRIs to better understand the internal anatomy that way. Physiologists, on the other hand, tend to focus more on the molecular and cellular level of what's going on in the bodies. So they can talk about larger functions, more obvious functions of the body, but nowadays we tend to focus more and more on the molecular and cellular level. And of course, there are a variety of subdisciplines to physiology, with one of them being pathophysiology, which is similar to pathoanatomy, that it is studying how the physiology changes in someone who has certain kinds of diseases. So anatomy and physiology together, looking at the digestive system. It's just an example of how these two sciences work together. So for instance, anatomists would look at, say, the small intestine, the stomach, the liver. They would see all these different organs. They may choose to focus on the form and structure of the intestine. They could see the relationship of the intestine to the rest of the body, where it's located, what it's connected to on its different ends. They could describe the structure of the intestine itself, say by looking at a cross-section of the wall and the different layers of tissues that make up the intestinal wall. And then they could go all the way down to the very cells that are forming those walls, so they could see, say, the structures at the very surface, internal surface of the small intestine, see the cells that make up the lining of the small intestine, and learn a lot about those cells and how they function in the small intestine. The physiologists, on the other hand, would be looking at function. So they would focus on how the intestine is able to move material along its length, what exactly is occurring to allow that process to occur. And in this case, that would be peristalsis. So they could examine the different muscle tissues found in the walls of the small intestine and how they contract both behind the material that's moving through it as well as along the length of where the material is to propel it along the small intestine in one direction primarily. And then they might also want to study how it is that nutrients are absorbed by the small intestine. So they could go down on the molecular and cellular level and see how large macromolecules, proteins, fats, carbohydrates get broken down by enzymes, and then those small, tiny nutrients are able to travel through the cells lining the small intestine and into the bloodstream. And then this gives you basically the structure and the functions of the small intestine as viewed by anatomists and physiologists. But to be honest, most people aren't strict anatomists or strict physiologists. Their studies will overlap, which is why this course, where we combine anatomy and physiology into a 2-semester course, is actually a pretty good way to do it. All right, we can break down the body on different organizational levels. So we could start at the smallest. For anatomy, in physiology, it would be the atom. And then atoms come together to form molecules. Molecules can be extremely large, giving us macromolecules made of thousands and thousands of atoms. Some macromolecules even visible in the microscope. Macromolecules come together then to form organelles. Organelles, tiny functional structures within the cell. And then the cells, of course, come together to form tissues. So tissues are lots of similar cells working together. And then if you have 2 or more tissues functioning together, then you have an organ. All the different organs found in a particular organ system, in this case, again, digestive system. And then all these systems coming together to form the organism itself. So smallest to largest structural levels of organization. There are certain properties common to all living things. Again, all living things are very complex and so have a very complex organization and arrangement. All living things engage in metabolism. Metabolism is the sum of all chemical reactions that occur within the body. So all chemical reactions occurring in your body is your metabolism. Metabolism, organization all come together to help in the growth and development of the organism, the human, whatever it is. For us, we grow taller as we go from a fertilized egg cell to an adult. And at the same time, we also change so that an infant is not structurally identical to a child, to a teenager, to an adult. We also have the very important feature of responsiveness. All living things need to be able to respond to their environment, to their external environment, say touching something super hot, pull away, or to your internal environment. So responding to changes in the environment, both external and internal. We also, in living things, have regulation, have adjusting the internal conditions in the body to try to maintain a stable internal environment. So there are certain ideal levels in our body for things like temperature, the chemical composition of blood, blood pressure, and so on. And so through regulation, we engage in homeostasis, in maintaining a constant internal environment, keeping ourselves as close as possible to those ideal conditions. And then finally, of course, living things have to reproduce more of their species and also to just reproduce more of their parts. So we have lots of cells that can divide to produce new cells in our body to do things like repair damage. All right, 11 body systems. That is how many we currently have established. This is what we'll be covering in your 2 semesters of this course. First up, the skeletal system. Skeletal system includes the bones, joints, and ligaments. Its functions include protection of underlying organs. Skeletal system provides a framework for our body, attachment site for muscles to allow movement. All blood cells are produced in the red bone marrow of the skeletal system, and the skeletal system also stores inorganic salts, especially calcium. Muscular system is the skeletal muscles attached to the skeleton, the joints, and the tendons that attach the muscles to the bones. In the muscular system, it allows for movement, a posture. Our posture is maintained by contractions of muscles, and also body temperature. Muscles contract, and those contractions generate heat. Nervous system includes the brain and the spinal cord, the nerves, and the sense organs that detect stimuli externally and internally. So the nervous system receives information from the sense organs. The brain, spinal cord then interprets that information and then decides if there's a response needed, oftentimes in order to maintain homeostasis. The integumentary system is the system that includes the skin. The skin, our largest organ of the body, also includes structures associated with the skin, the subcutaneous layer, the nails, the hair. Skin's job is protection. It helps protect underlying tissues from injury, from abrasions, from chemicals, from UV radiation. The skin is also a very sensuous organ. It has lots of sensory receptors for touch, for tickle, for itch, for temperature, for pain. And the skin is also involved in regulating body temperature. You get too hot, you'll sweat, and the water as it evaporates from the sweat will lower your body temperature, for example. Endocrine system. Endocrine system is a collection of diverse structures that all do one similar function, which is to secrete hormones. Hormones that are often involved in regulating metabolism. So it includes the hypothalamus, which is part of the brain, the pituitary glands, the thyroid gland in the throat, the pancreas, the ovaries, the testes, the adrenal glands on top of the kidneys. Cardiovascular system includes the heart, the arteries, the veins, the capillaries, and the function of the cardiovascular system is to pump blood through the blood vessels, and the blood will then be transporting various substances, hormones, nutrients, wastes, electrolytes, oxygen, carbon dioxide, heat. Heat's also transported by the cardiovascular system. Then we have the lymphatic system. Lymphatic system includes the lymph nodes, the lymph vessels, the spleen. Lymphatic system is involved in transporting excess fluids from tissues back to the cardiovascular system. It also is involved in moving fatty substances that we absorb from the digestive system to the bloodstream. And it has a very important role in protecting us against infection. Our immune response is very important and linked closely to the lymphatic system. Digestive system, as we know, mouth, esophagus, stomach, intestines, liver, pancreas, involved in breaking food into small nutrients that can be absorbed, the actual absorbing of those particles into the bloodstream, and then eliminating the excess materials that could not be digested and absorbed. Respiratory system includes the nose, nasal cavity, the larynx, trachea, bronchi, lungs, involved in the moving in and out of air into the lungs, out of the lungs, and this allows for gas exchange, for blood to lose carbon dioxide into the lungs, and for oxygen to leave the lungs and into the bloodstream. Urinary system includes the kidneys, the ureters, the urinary bladder, and urethra. Kidney's job is to remove wastes from the blood. Kidneys' jobs are also to maintain the proper composition of blood in terms of blood volume, water, electrolytes. The urinary bladder stores urine, and then, of course, the urethra expels the urine out of the body. Then the reproductive system. Reproductive system in mammals includes the testes, scrotum, prostate, penis, all about producing, maintaining, and transporting sperm out. Then the females, you have the ovaries, uterine tubes, uterus, vagina, all about producing and maintaining the oocyte or egg cells, receiving sperm, supporting the development of the embryo or fetus, and of course the birth process to expel the embryo. Here is the anatomical position. In the anatomical position, you have the arms laying on the sides, face forward, feet by the sides, and the palms are facing anteriorly. The palms are facing toward the front. This is where we'll stop for this lecture.